you know how it is. Once a rebel, always a rebel.
Disney's Ahsoka released last year to mixed reviews from fans and critics. On one hand, it was an entertaining show and put Grand Admiral Thrawn back in play in the Star Wars universe. On the other hand, it can be critiqued for the same questionable or downright bad writing choices that have plagued so many Star Wars properties over the last decade. Questionable character choices, a contrived plot, things very much so happening because the writers want them to. You know, Star Wars. But there was one particular criticism lobbed at it by the YouTube channel, the Templin Institute, that I wanted to address. According to Mark from the Institute, Disney wrote Hera Syndulla in such a way that she could be considered a fascist. But that is something that I just wholeheartedly disagree with. Not because I agree with the way her character was written, I don't. But it certainly shouldn't qualify as fascist ideology, as I will explain in this video. And before I do, let me just state that this is not a takedown video of the Templin Institute or of Mark personally. I thoroughly enjoy the Templin Institute videos. I am a subscriber to them on my personal YouTube account. I just firmly disagree that the title of fascist is appropriate to use in this case, and I wanted to discuss it. I am your host, Jacob. Join us as we explain why Hera Syndulla is not a fascist and what the actual problem with the show is. Hello everyone, before we get started with this video, I just want to let you guys know that we have actually started a second channel, FairlyAdventurous, where me and a bunch of other my YouTube friends will be playing tabletop roleplay games like Dungeons and Dragons. That's actually the one we're starting with. We also have a tactical roleplay game that I have developed that will be releasing in the spring that we call Halo 2 ODST. So if that sounds like something you guys are interested in, you're interested in roleplay games, you're interested in board game players, you're interested in just a bunch of guys having fun, a link will be in the description. Check out FairlyAdventurous. The first 4 episodes of our D&D game have already released, along with a bunch of promotional material and lore entries, so check them out, see what you think, and we will see you over there. But right now, let's get back to the video you actually clicked on. If you haven't seen Templin's video, I will briefly recap their points for you, but I do highly encourage you to go and watch the original after this. A link will be in the description. And while you are there, check out some of their other content. It's high quality H2O. Mark's argument begins with stating the importance of civilian oversight in a healthy democracy, and points to Hera's frustration with that oversight as a problem. But it isn't just that a general is frustrated with an overzealous senator trying to make a name for themselves. I am sure that that happens in real life with real generals and real admirals. No, the problem begins when Hera insults the senator openly because he won't blindly agree to her request to act on her shoddy evidence. A general or admiral mouthing off to any elected official like this represents utter contempt for the democratic principles of oversight and responsibility. An officer must exemplify the values of the democracy they swore an oath to, and the higher the rank, the higher the standard placed on them. And I agree with him on this point, but we'll come back to that. Let's move to the next point of the argument. Hera equating military service with patriotism.
Were you ever in the war, Senator?
No.
Just sat back and waited to see who came out on top?
Hera insinuates that because the senator didn't serve, his opinion is of lesser or no value compared to hers, since she fought on the front lines against the Empire. Mark, again, rightly points out that not everyone fights for their country with a blaster, and that shouldn't mean that they are unpatriotic. I mean, heck, you have Mon Mothma standing right there. Someone who never fired a weapon once during the war, but who is certainly a key figure in the New Republic's ascension. But even if we take rebel leaders out of the equation, there is no reason to believe that Senator Giono is less dedicated to the fledgling democracy than Hera is. I mean, other than her unsubstantiated comment that he only chose the Republic after determining it was going to win. And this comment specifically, in Mark's words, attempts to, quote, sideline any meaningful debate in favor of some hierarchy of legitimacy based on personal history rather than the democratic mandate, end quote. And that leads us to the final point in the argument. When Hera is court-martialed for disregarding a direct order from the civilian oversight she is responsible to, She is entirely unrepentant and disrespects the authority the senators have. Or, in other words, she delegitimizes the authority of the civilian overseers required to ensure a healthy democracy can thrive. In her words, though, she simply ignored the senators in order to protect the people of the Republic. Quote, the only way she knows how, end quote. It is completely inappropriate for a general to do this, but I'll let Mark describe his own conclusion to these affronts.
But if the best way you know how to protect the people of the Republic involves ignoring their elected officials, politicizing their military, delegitimizing their civil authorities, publicly bullying those who disagree with you, equating combat experience with patriotism, and undermining the principles of democracy, well, there's a word for that.
Yeah, rebel. Rebel is the word to describe Hera here. I agree with the professional requirements of a general in a democratic society. It is completely inappropriate for her to have lashed out at an elected official whose job it is to provide oversight into her command. Frankly, she should be dismissed and reassigned somewhere where her tactical talents can be of use. But it is not fair to label her a fascist. And to prove my point, we need to discuss what fascism actually is. In preparation for this video, I searched online for articles and videos that could help me explain the ideology of fascism in a concise manner. Two of the better videos I found are What is Fascism by Horses and Fascism, an in-depth explanation by Ryan Chapman. Horses comes at the process from a historian's perspective and tries to define what fascism looks like through the tactics fascist governments have used in the past. Essentially trying to diagnose the disease by looking at the symptoms. Ultimately, he, like most historians, is unable to come up with a concise definition for fascism, because many of the tactics he discusses can be observed in other forms of government or political movements on both sides of the political spectrum. Despite not being able to come up with an easy answer, I do still recommend you watch his video, because what he does really well is explain the danger of both fascism and mislabeling everything as fascism. A link will be in the description if you have time to check it out. Ryan Chapman approaches the problem by looking at it from a political philosophy perspective. Essentially, he follows the philosophical roots that fascist writers like Hitler and Mussolini claimed as inspiration and how it affected their own writings. Ultimately, he does come up with a succinct definition, and it is this conclusion that I will be using for the basis of my argument in this video. To summarize his conclusion, fascism is the political philosophy of blood and land. A hive of people who all consider themselves linked by common heritage, a heritage, by the way, that is in some way superior to all others, with the singular focus of making a nation great at the cost of their own critical thinking and individualism. And before I continue, I do want to point out that that is a summary of a summary. I do highly recommend that you go and watch Ryan Chapman's video for a better understanding of his approach and his conclusion. Again, a link will be in the description. With this understanding, let's look at Hera's words and actions to see if she's espousing fascist ideology here. Yes, chiding someone for not serving in the military inherently equates military service with patriotism. And yes, equating military service with patriotism is commonly seen in fascist regimes. But it is certainly not unique to fascism. All authoritarian regimes do the same thing whether they are fascist or not. It is certainly wrong to wield it as a weapon to degrade the logical arguments of others, but it does not inherently belong to fascist ideology. Yes, she is willing to violate orders to protect the people of the Republic, but I don't see her claiming that the people are inherently better than any other in the galaxy, or that her unalienable duty to the Mother Republic would not allow her to ignore such a threat to the pure and good citizens of the Republic. I don't see any suggestions of the superiority of her blood or nation, only the appropriate level of belief and confidence that she has a duty to protect the citizens of the Republic as an officer in the Republic fleet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In short, labeling Hera as a fascist for these reasons is a mistake. Look, I am not here to defend the story or the writing of Ahsoka. I found the show to be entertaining, but like most Star Wars products over the last 10 years, wanting in the writing department. There are legitimate reasons to pick on the show, but a fascist protagonist is not one of them. If anything, we should complain about Disney choosing to keep Hera stunted by putting her in a show that cared less about character development than it did about ensuring all the cookie-cutter plot pieces fell into place to result in their contrived outcome. In fact, let's do that now. Ahsoka takes place approximately 10 years after the events of Star Wars Rebels, but it doesn't really seem like much has changed for these characters internally. Sabine hasn't been able to move on from the loss of Ezra, and you know what? Fair enough. That is an understandable and compelling basis for a story arc. But Hera has been a general for a long time now. Even more, she has been a general in the New Republic for at least 4 years. That means she must have been contending with oversight, command structure, and bureaucracy for a long time. Her character should have an understanding about her role in the galaxy by now. Generals make decisions. They form high-level relationships with influential people and organizations in their area of operations. They are responsible for ensuring the forces they command are up to the task of their given mission set. Those responsibilities are time-consuming, so Hera personally joining Ahsoka's investigation is utter nonsense. She shouldn't be in the field as an operative. But you know what? I cannot blame them for doing this. Many shows struggle with having main characters that develop into leaders of armies, and yet still need to go on daring raids. In fact, Star Wars has a history of individuals with high military ranks being way too involved in the tactical operations, going all the way back to the original movies.
General Solo, is your strike team assembled?
It's very common. However, in choosing to do it this way, I think they missed a great opportunity to introduce some drama. I mean, what if it wasn't the Senate saying no to Sabine and Ahsoka? What if it was Hera? What if Hera was the one who looked at the evidence and said it was insufficient to act? She could use her position to direct funding and maybe even intelligence to Ahsoka to aid her in the investigation. But that wouldn't be enough for Sabine. She would certainly feel betrayed by Hera, and that would be rather compelling. Certainly more compelling than the forced conflict between Ahsoka and Sabine. In fact, if Hera was in a more bureaucratic role, that would have given more screen time to developing the relationship between Sabine and Ahsoka. But if Disney absolutely needed Hera to be a field agent, then they should have played up Hera's frustration with the bureaucracy/oversight much more. Not in the way they did, but rather showing her actually complying with Senator Giono and coming to the realization that she has too much of a rebel in her to be an effective general. Then she could resign her commission and join Ahsoka and Sabine in the field like Disney clearly wanted her to do. And speaking of Senator Giono, can we all take a collective sigh of exasperation at Disney clearly setting him up to be a plant for the First Order? I mean, he is written to be a comically pompous and smug Imperial agent, and it is getting, gosh, so frustrating. Look, the senators were right to deny a request for an entire fleet to move on the flimsy evidence that Hera had at that point. The galaxy is a very large and very dangerous place, and sending an entire fleet on what Hera had at that moment would have been incredibly irresponsible. But by writing him in this pompous manner, the show wants us to look at him as the bad guy, which suggests that the only reason Hera's request was denied is because Giono is in on the plot in some way. It's incredibly predictable, and it is just so boring. Military officers at every level need to exhibit and reinforce the values of the nation they fight for, and Hera does not do that. And by setting up Giono as the bad guy, Hera doesn't have to grow as a character. Disney plays it safe by keeping her as the rebel hero that won't let rules and regulations stop her from doing what she thinks is right. But in doing so, I think they really missed out on good character drama between Hera, Ahsoka, and Sabine. If they really wanted Hera to be a field operative, then they could have shown her giving up her position and leaving the fleet after realizing she is not fit for the role. Even better, they could have shown the maturity and development of a leader who knows when to say no, even to a friend. Instead, they gave us a rebel where a general should have been. And while that is certainly a valid criticism, it certainly isn't fascist. But if you want to make your own judgment about that, then please watch the videos by Horses, Ryan Chapman, and the Templin Institute. Again, links are in the description. Before you go, if you liked this video or can at least appreciate the hard work that went into it, then please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. I've been your host, Jacob. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today, and I will see you in the next one.
No, I did not go through your stuff.